What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Hugo Strange here one more time. Just wanted to share some more scripture with you guys. There's a certain story in the Bible that everybody seems to tell, and everybody seems to tell the same way. But I'm gonna tell it a different way, and I'm gonna take a different look at this. Something I noticed that leaped out to me, and maybe it'll leap out to you, and I just wanted to share it with you and discuss among the comments. So we're just going to dive in. We're looking at a very familiar story. We're looking at Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 to 27. Of course, this is the infamous Jesus calms the storm story. We all know the story. Jesus is on a boat with his disciples. Wind kicks up, the boat's rocking, it's going crazy. The disciples go, they get Jesus up, and they tell him, hey, we're gonna die, do something. Jesus goes and rebukes the wind, and everything's calm. And of course, the sermon ends up being, oh, Jesus can calm the storms in your life, and, just trust him, etc., etc., etc. Which, yeah, yes, bang on, 100%. But we're missing a bit more extrapolation from the text. So I just want to dive in real quick and just read it, and then we'll go from there. Says, then he got into a boat, and his disciples followed him. Without warning, a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. Pay attention to that. The disciples went and woke him up, saying, Lord, save us. We're going to drown. Remember that. He replied, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked themselves, what kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. There's a couple of things I ask you to remember. Well, first and foremost, Jesus was asleep. Let's stick a pin in that one. But here's the thing, though. He's on a boat, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, because it says suddenly, this storm started raging. Now, I read somewhere that waves, at least in that part of the world, can get up to 10 feet high. So the boat is just literally like, on this trajectory of just getting flung hither and thither, yar and var and all that. And Jesus is asleep. Let's stick a pin in that. Jesus is asleep. But the disciples, they go and they wake him up. One of these things are not like the others. In a crisis, let's say you're on a boat and there are waves rocking the boat. Now, this is a boat large enough that they have a lower deck where somebody is asleep. Jesus is not getting water splashed on him or anything like that. Clearly, the man's not seasick. So this is a boat large enough where Jesus is not getting splashed, because that would wake up anybody instantly. But he's not getting splashed. So they have to go and wake him up. Now, if you're in any sort of crisis and somebody is asleep, are you going to go and wake that person up? Probably not, especially on a boat. You're looking for life rafts, you're looking for rope, something to either, hold yourself down, anchor yourself, you're looking to anchor the ship, maybe some lifeboats, something. But you're not going to wake someone up. That's probably the last on your priorities. But they go and wake him up. Well, why? It tells us, Lord, save us. We're going to drown. Lord, save us. We're going to drown. what was the urgency there? They expected him to do something. So they woke him up, because instead of going to grab rope and something to anchor themselves and something to stabilize the boat and any of that, they went to him and they woke him up, expecting him to do something. They knew he could do something. They said, Lord, save us. We are going to drown. So they knew where the help was. They knew how to go get help. They knew how to run to help. They knew that help was there. All we had to do is wake him up and he will do something. And they were right. So Jesus wakes up and he has words for them. He says, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Now, we take this as a rebuke. Oh, you of little faith, you of little faith, oh, you of little faith. But notice he says little faith, not no faith, little faith. There's times where he says no faith, but there are other times where he says little faith. This is little faith. Little faith. So then he gets up and he rebukes the winds and everything's good. But I just want to rewind a little bit and go back to the story here. To the beginning of the story. Jesus is asleep on this boat, and suddenly the storms kick up. Now, that's a huge metaphor for life, where the storms kick up in our lives and we think that God is doing nothing. But here's the thing. He was doing something. In that boat, Jesus was doing something. What was he doing? He was asleep. Well, why was he asleep? Because he knew who was in control. And he knew that if he was there among his disciples, no matter what was going on around him, that boat was literally the safest place on earth at that time. That was literally the safest place on earth. And so Jesus was resting, knowing that no matter what was going on outside, his Father was taking control of the situation. That he was going to be safe. Did anybody really think that the boat was going to capsize, Jesus was going to possibly drown, and maybe some dolphins were going to come by and grab his body and swim? No. No. Jesus was asleep. He was resting. Because he knew that he was safe. Now, the reason why Jesus said little faith and not no faith is because the apostles knew where to get help. But they didn't take the cue from Jesus that maybe we should be just as chill as him. Because if he's chill, maybe we need to chill out too. Maybe this situation isn't as bad as we think it is. If he's here. He's here with us. And this is why I said in the previous video that they understood what they had, but they didn't understand what they had. They knew he was special, they knew Jesus was important, but they didn't know how special. They didn't know how important. But they knew enough to wake him up. They knew enough to know he could do something to save them. They didn't know what he was going to do or how he was going to do it, but they knew that this man, if we wake him up, he can do something to save us. And this is why he says little faith, not no faith, little faith. And as Christians, we get in panic mode sometimes and we cry out to God and we do all of these things and we're freaking out and we're just like the apostles in the boat. Little faith, not no faith, little faith. Because notice, Jesus rebuked the winds. Jesus stopped the chaos. But the apostles didn't have enough faith to trust him in the chaos. The end result of the trip was the same. They got to where they were going. Okay, that didn't change. The destination didn't change. just the journey getting there. And when the apostles realized, hey, I don't like this journey, I don't like this, this is getting scary, let's go wake up Jesus so he can stop this. They didn't take their cue from Jesus and rest like someone else is doing. That's my daughter. If you heard her on the recording, she's not resting. But that's what I mean, though. So we often talk about how that story is about, oh, Jesus can calm the storms in your life. No, it's not about calming the storms in your life. It's about riding the storms in your life with Jesus. The apostles should have just let that be. They should have just left the storm the way it was. Because again, that boat with Jesus on it is the safest place on earth, no matter what is happening around you. And that's easy to say here when we live in America with all of the things that we have. But there are other people in other countries who understand this message completely. And I want you to understand this message completely. Because again, at the end of the result, at the end of the journey, they got exactly to where they were going. There was no detour. They didn't have to go down roads or paths or wind up somewhere else. No, they got exactly to where they were going. Same way, same route, everything. Just in the middle of that, there was a storm. And when the disciples didn't like that, instead of taking the cue from Jesus and resting, they got scared. But they knew who to cry out to. And sometimes when we want to cry out, that's maybe the time that we should take our cue from God. When it seems like there are things happening around us that are outside of our hands, that are just, we're completely undone by those things. There's nothing we can do about them. Maybe instead of asking God to calm the storm, maybe we need to ask him to be with us in the storm. Maybe that's our time to rest in him. Maybe that's our time to pick up our Bible and pray. Maybe that's our time to start reading. Maybe that's God's cue to say, take your eyes off of the scary stuff around you, because it is scary. Again, Jesus didn't rebuke them. He said, little faith. Your faith is little. I gotta go deal with that, but you guys chew on that for a while, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace in Christ.